It was meant to be a warning, an intelligence bulletin from the Department of Homeland Security alerting local, state, and federal law enforcement to a Russian scheme to damage Joe Biden's presidential campaign. The draft bulletin, titled "Russia Likely to Denigrate Health of U.S. Candidates to Influence 2020 Election," said intelligence analysts had determined with high confidence that Russia is trying to convince voters that Joe Biden isn't mentally fit to be president. As evidence, the bulletin cites stories by Russian-controlled news outlets from September 2019 until May of this year, claiming, without evidence, that Joe Biden's, quote, verbal miscues are symptoms of dementia. We assess Russian malign influence actors are likely to continue denigrating presidential candidates through allegations of poor mental or physical health to influence the outcome of the 2020 elections, the bulletin said. The Trump campaign's message on Biden's fitness has been similar to the one the bulletin attributes to the Russians, including this ad released in June.
Joe Biden is slipping.
Rapidly rising
shortly before the DHS document was drafted.
In terms of the White House, what are they saying about this? Are they saying that they plan to take any particular steps to address it?
The White House today, officials tell me, are really focused on making sure that our elections are safe. They say they're not going to tolerate any sort of foreign interference and that they're working with all 50 states as well as social media companies to keep the elections safe. That said, President Trump has been loath to talk about election interference. First in 2016 when intelligence communities said that Russia was interfering on his behalf, and now in 2020 when they say Russia is doing the same thing. The president instead has been focused on mail-in voting and saying that there's widespread fraud there, even though there is no evidence of that. So Democrats and critics of the president say he's not focused enough on this issue.
To an exclusive ABC News report raising questions about how the Trump administration is dealing with possible Russian interference in the election. ABC News learning that a warning about Russian dirty tricks was pulled 2 days before it was set to go out to law enforcement. Chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl has more on that. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Amy. ABC News has obtained a draft Department of Homeland Security bulletin that warns about Russian attempts to interfere in the upcoming election. It was a warning that was supposed to be issued nearly 2 months ago to law enforcement agencies, but never went out, raising serious questions about who stopped it and why. In response to our story, a spokesperson for the president's campaign told ABC, "We will beat Joe Biden fair and square, and we don't need or want any foreign interference." But the withholding of this document, TJ, is especially significant considering the recent announcement by the Director of National Intelligence to cut off in-person briefings to Congress on election interference.
The Russian ongoing interest in this president, and as the intelligence community has publicly said, their interest in making sure that he is reelected has become kind of a theme song in terms of us trying to assess the president's motives for a lot of his harder to explain behavior, particularly with regard to Russia, but also around a lot of foreign policy and intelligence issues over time. I feel like from the biggest possible picture here, part of what the president has learned, part of what the president's political supporters have learned, is sort of no matter what they get caught out for when it comes to Russia and knowingly assisting in Russia's efforts and accepting their help and asking for more of it and trying to capitalize on it, they never get in trouble for any of it. And so I feel like they're just becoming more blatant about the fact that they're okay with Russia interfering on their behalf.
Well, I do think it is unfortunate, to say the least, that 3.5 years later, the United States Congress, the House has passed bills, but the Senate, under Mitch McConnell, has not even voted on a single bill that said, if Russia chooses or their agents choose to put up advertisements on Facebook, there ought to be the same disclosure requirements that if they advertise on MSNBC. Or, how about this for a law that shouldn't be a big stretch? If a foreign government offers you dirt in a presidential campaign, the appropriate response ought to be tell the FBI, don't say thank you. We couldn't even vote on those additional rules. And that, I think, makes us less secure. Now, we are safer because election officials of both parties across the country have stepped up. We are safer because, while not perfect, the social media companies are doing better at trying to ferret out some of the most abusive misinformation. We are better because literally hundreds of counterintelligence professionals are doing their job. But the fact that this White House refuses to acknowledge what the intelligence community uniformly said 10 days ago that Russia is back. Now China and Iran are also trying to interfere in our democracy should give us all a little bit of pause, whatever, 77 days before election. As Americans, who do we want to have decide our elections? It should be Americans. We may disagree with Mr. Trump and his supporters, but it ought to be Americans deciding amongst each other, not outside foreign entities trying to weigh in and tip the scales one way or the other. And I think we've still got a responsibility. I've still got a responsibility to push the intelligence community even more to continue to educate the American public, not so much about what happened in 2016, but what happened in 2020. These other nations are still trying to interfere because, in a sense, the soft underbelly of democracy is our systems. And if you can undermine people's confidence in our system, and unfortunately, out of the White House, we've seen this president talk about not being willing to perhaps go by the results of the election, or, as the earlier story had pointed out, an unprecedented assault from the post office. So my hope would be that people of goodwill of both parties would look at what happened in 2016, look at this bipartisan report, read it, and then like to make sure 2020 we don't have it happen again. I'll push the intelligence community to come clean with all their information, and then Americans ought to make sure we decide this election, not foreign entities.